All right, so you know who I am, and now I can dive into my session. Let me know when I'm like 10 minutes past my session, so maybe then I will stop, maybe. We'll see. I've got a lot of slides. So why are we here? We are here because you guys are interested in building mobile applications, right? But the problem is that if you wanted to build an iOS app, an Android app, you'd have to learn two completely different stacks of technology, and then keeping in sync and all that was actually not very easy. It was quite difficult. So early days, like if you go like a few years back, like the solution that came up was Cordova, right? Like you drop a web view inside a mobile application, and then you build an app that pretends to be a mobile app, right? Like it works inside a mobile app, and you can do pretty cool stuff with it, but it had some limitations, right? So basically, this was the idea where you were trying to use the web's reach, and then natives, like you had like on one side, the web and its reach and the technologies, and then on the right side you had native, which is performance and the UX, all that. But hybrid was coming with compromises, which was basically a bit of a problem, right? But this is necessarily clicker. There we go. What's going on? I really wanted to show you that GIF. Come on, show it. Nope, not this one. There we go. Yeah. So I mean, like, haters gonna hate, because like obviously there'll be cases where Cordova is not perfect. It's still very usable in many cases, but you know it's not always great. So the whole idea is that in the past we're looking really at two binary choices. You were either going fast to market but you had to compromise on the UX, or you were getting the best experience, but you were doing one platform at a time, and it was expensive to cover, you know, all the platforms. Luckily, this is not a binary choice anymore, because you could kind of have something that is between hybrid and native, right? And that actually, yes, that's like, you know, celebration, is when the idea of JavaScript-driven native came about. So it's basically a concept where you had a native app that would use a native UI, and you'd be accessing native APIs, but the language that would drive the business logic of the application would be running in JavaScript, right? So you'd have a JavaScript engine, and you run all those. And then there was a whole bunch of frameworks that were doing that. So I'm not claiming that NativeScript is the only one. There's a whole bunch of us that does it very similarly. So you have NativeScript, React Native, you have Flutter, you have Vue, you have Wix. And then all of them kind of follow the same pattern where you would use like web technologies, but you would actually get a native app with native UIs for it. But then you have all this choice, and really we are diving into, you know, like the choosing a framework is like a ritual, right? It's like, how do you choose which one you want? It's difficult, so I'm gonna make it a little bit easier for you, right? Next. So basically, if you just look at NativeScript and React Native, because we are like the closest cousins to each other. And we actually, despite the appearance, we like each other, we talk to each other, we help each other. But if you have to choose between the two of us, really, here are some of the key differences. So the first one, my clicker is really stubborn. There we go. Is the choice of frameworks. If you want to use Angular, Vue, or plain JavaScript or just TypeScript, like you go with NativeScript. If you want to use React as part of your framework, you're using React Native. We actually just in the process of adding Svetel, and also actually adding React to NativeScript, which is funny. That's like a community work. But if you basically are an Angular developer, then you should basically go in with NativeScript. If you today are a React developer, I'll probably say go with React Native, like with clean heart. Yeah, we like each other. NativeScript is created by Progress. That's the company I work for, while React Native is created by Facebook. So obviously React Native is more popular because, you know, they have a marketing company behind them, you know. We are a technology company behind us, so it's working well. That's basically the idea. And also, like, the licensing is different. They use MIT licensing. We use Apache 2, which basically, with Apache 2, you get full freedom. Like, you should never be worried that we will do something funny with NativeScript. It's always going to be free, and you can use it for anything you want. We're not going to charge you, which is pretty cool. And then in our case, Kinvey is actually our backend that we use for enterprise, and NativeScript is a key component of that. So that's also a big influence behind us putting a lot of effort in making sure that NativeScript runs really, really well. So let me give you a proper intro to NativeScript. So NativeScript is basically an open source framework for building truly native mobile apps. You can use, web technologies, and you get native UI out of it with native performance and native user experience. That's basically the idea. The timeline of the project, so we've been going actually for quite a while. In 2015, we launched the first version 1.0 where we thought we were ready. Well, we exactly weren't ready back then, but we said we were. Then in 2016, that's when the product, and 17, that's when the product really matured. And like towards the end of 2017, we were really ready. And then like 2018, we had like mass adoption. And then 2019, like we basically expanded across different ecosystems, which is pretty cool. So like our growth was pretty awesome. So if we go a few years back, we only had 30,000 people, or 30,000 downloads on NPM. Now we are around 3 million, which is pretty awesome. And then if we look at like what is really in NativeScript, yeah, it's open source. Mentioned that it's truly native. You're using your web skills and using those frameworks. So basically, if you think in NativeScript, this should be your main benefits why you should go with it. But also, the performance is pretty awesome. So the native difference, like the fact that you can use native UI, you get access to the native animations, and you make no compromises around the UI. It's just basically what it should be from a mobile application, but using your web skills to develop all of that. So like these animations, they could be all done with CSS, which is pretty amazing. And since we're using native UI, we get native performance. You can have foxes running around you. Work on NativeScript. It runs on NativeScript, trust me. It's pretty cool. You get direct access to the native API. So we actually are the only framework that does it this way. So from JavaScript, you could access directly Android SDK or like the Xcode libraries and all of that without any problems at all. It's pretty cool. My clicker is being stubborn. Come on. You also get like a maximum code and skill reusability. So since we're talking about web technologies and everything, we are even looking at cases where you could have the same code for Android, iOS, and even web. You could reuse a lot of those code. It's just Angular, right? Why not? So we're really looking at a case where if you in the past wanted to do 3 platforms, web, iOS, and Android, you'd have to write 3 separate models, three separate views and controllers or all of that. While we basically changed the game so that it's not all of that. You would have 1 model, 2 views, so you have 1 description of the UI for the web, 1 for mobile, and then the controlling of the application will be also shared between the 2. So it's a lot less code. You could share a lot, which is very good. And also, you could reuse all the existing native libraries. So if somebody gives you this calendar written in iOS, you could actually just drop it in the project, write a little wrapper, and you work straight away. It's like if you experience building plugins, it could take you like a couple of hours to do it. It's really not that hard. So how does NativeScript work? Well, my first answer usually is, it's magic. It just magically works. Developers make it happen. But more on the serious side, running JavaScript to talk to the native API directly works like this. So I'm running my JavaScript code here. And when I'm calling like native API, maybe to take a picture or something, first I'm going to metadata. So I have this take picture. Basically, at this moment, the metadata is like library that has all the functions and types that exist on the native library. And in metadata, I'm checking, does this function exist? If yes, get a handle for it, right? Next, if I'm passing any parameters to it, to like, the width and height of the of the picture that I want to get, those are all like JavaScript types. So we have this type conversion that takes the JavaScript types, converts them to native types. And then we have the call dispatcher that actually executes the call on the native layer, and then brings back the result, and then type conversion again converts the native types back to JavaScript. But for you, really, you only ever work at this level at the bottom, where you just write JavaScript and everything works like magic. It's pretty cool. So here's an example. This is actually a JavaScript call calling a native API from Android. Like, so this code, just using the flow that I described just a moment ago, just runs on Android. We can do something similar for iOS. So you could actually create new UI alert view, set the message, code add button with title, and call show. And if you're thinking like, how do I even know those methods and parameters exist? Basically, you could just go straight to the documentation for Xcode. All of that is described there. It just works. Because like our metadata just get generated on the fly, which is pretty amazing. And all of those basically run on JavaScript virtual machines. So Android, we run on V8. And then iOS, we run on JavaScript core, although we are migrating it now to just use V8, which is quite nice. But then I'm basically talking directly from JavaScript to a native API separately to iOS and Android, and you go like, why you'd want me to do that, right? Well, it's only because you could. It doesn't necessarily mean that you should, right? Like, so for most of your development, in reality, you'll be using NativeScript modules. So they abstract out the common behavior. So if you want to, for example, create a new file object, you're not going to write the separate code that is below. But what you're going to do is just run these two lines, like import the type, just create a new one, and then this code-specific platform code like executes for you, which is pretty cool. And then in reality, most of your development will work like that, where you have your application code. Most of it will directly use the NativeScript core modules, and then sometimes you might want to use the runtime functionality. And then as a result, we give you an Android and iOS application, which I think is pretty amazing. So let's move on. So putting it all together, basically we have this idea. Using a markup, just like HTML, together with JavaScript and CSS, boom, you have a mobile application. I think that's the essence of it. So, and you have, like I mentioned that as well, like a nice choice of different architectures. So use JavaScript, TypeScript, Angular, or Vue, you name it. So starting Hello World, like you want to build an application. How do you do that? The easiest way is actually to use NativeScript CLI, so you can install it with NPM. Just call TNS create, give it the name of the project, then go inside the project, and you just call TNS preview. And then using the app I mentioned before, you can just scan a QR code, and you immediately connect your project to your mobile app. And then when you create a project, depending on different platforms, you will get a file project that looks just like a web project, where you have CSS files, JavaScript or TypeScript files, XML or HTML files, depending on the platforms that you use, and then you can execute those. So let's play some of the core concepts. All the components, we use an abstraction again, so you don't have to do two separate UIs. You say, I want to switch. We give you native switches either for iOS and Android. It just happens all behind the scenes, which is quite nice. And then out of the box, you have a whole bunch of UI components that are embedded in the core of NativeScript. But also, we are not limited to that. There's like over 1,000 NPM modules that bring additional UI components and other functionality, which is quite nice. And then building a mobile app basically will consist of things like labels and text fields, and you have a list view, and then segmented bar, and all of those are native components. So you get, again, pure performance. In mobile, there's no such thing as div. So if you're building a web application, you want to set up the layout of the app, you'd use divs and a lot of different styling on top of it. In mobile, there is no div, so we had to come up with a different idea. So what you use in mobile, you have different layouts. So you have like an absolute layout, a dock layout, grid, stack, wrap, and there's even a flex layout as well. So you're basically using a combination of those layouts to arrange your site. So yeah, this is an example of Flexbox layout as well. You can use Flex, works quite nicely. So the previous application, really, the whole app will be in one stack layout. Then we would have a grid layout in the middle, where you put label on the left, text field on the right, another grid layout, and then you kind of rearrange your applications using those layouts. And I mentioned styling before as well. So styling is always fun. And if you do it long enough, your application is going to get better and better and better. Well, that's basically me using CSS. That's basically me. Come on, it will work eventually one day. Nope, it's not gonna. So we basically support this whole bunch of CSS properties. So we don't support everything that you have in the web because we had to implement each of those using native functionality, right? It takes a bit of effort, but all our components pretty much follow this styling. But we follow the exact the syntax and the way CSS works in the web. So you have element types, classes, IDs, all of that works quite nicely. All right, next thing, debugging. Debugging can be tricky, you know? You can try different methods, mess up with cuts. Oh my God. I went to sleep at 5 in the morning. I had so much fun with those GIFs. It was so funny. But no, seriously. All right, debugging NativeScript. Debug alert. Well, no, not really. Probably most of you would do console log. Yeah, fine, yeah. But I mean, it works, but don't do it too much. It's a terrible idea. If you really want to debug, you could run commands like tns debug, and then you get access to Chrome DevTools or Safari Web Inspector, where you can actually see the web elements or put breakpoints inside Chrome. You can even execute your own commands inside the console and all of that. It works really nicely. And if you're using Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, we also have embedded debugging there. So you could just run, press the green arrow thing, and then it just starts the project for you, and you can debug directly your TypeScript from VS Code. It's not going to work with the playground that I used because you need to use NativeScript CLI for it, but you have access to all of those things. The easy way is to start. So I showed you Playground, so that's one way of starting, and you can definitely go and play with it. There's even a tutorial embedded in there, so it's cool. Another way of using NativeScript is by using NativeScript CLI. So just install from npm NativeScript, that gives you the CLI, and you have full access to the development process. Or you could use even this tool we call Kinvey Studio. So we call it low-code approach. So it's basically for developers that don't want to code everything. You can just drag and drop or use templates. So the application I could build in 3 seconds there, right? Because it gives you templating for building pretty cool applications. It's more drag and drop than actually code, but there's still bits that you can code yourself. It's worth checking out. It's quite cool. Anything else? Well, our community. Our community is really cute. We love every single one of them. And that's me. I'm the boss. Hey! Now, our community is really great. We have a pretty active community, which is good. Some of them write books, so you can check out some of the NativeScript books. There's one that is around the course of the NativeScript, and then there's one specifically for Angular as well. One of the best ways also to learn, it's my friend Alex Ziskin, so he's over there. He created a site called nativescripting.com, so he just added ing. And funny enough, I go there more often than to nativescript.org. That now when I start typing native on my browser, you always go to NativeScripting. It just drives me mad. But hey, it's a pretty cool site. Some of the courses are paid, but there's a lot of free content as well, so it's a good way to get yourself started. We obviously have a Slack channel. Who wants the 25th Slack channel, right? Here's your 25th Slack channel. So you can join yeah, we are way past 11,000 people by now. But it's pretty cool. It's a good place to get some help. So you can go and drop some questions or help out other people. But yeah, basically, if you want to learn anything, just go to nativescript.org. All our docs are there and everything. And you can also learn about the Kinvey Studio. And yeah, thank you very much.